Hey, hello, and welcome into the Halloween special. I'm Blue, and I will be your spooky guide. Yet again, I found myself wandering into the Kika Goods website, and today I have a nice treat for us to enjoy. We'll be building a magical study together, and along the way, I'll be recounting some scary stories that were submitted by my lovely members. Near the end of our journey, I will tell you about one of my own haunting experiences. But first, let me introduce you to this kit. This is the Magic Study DIY kit by Rolife. Everything you will need Everything you will need to build your magic study is in this kit. Though, to make things a bit easier for myself, I'll be using my crafting tweezers for the extra tiny bits. The instructions booklet is fully illustrated and easy to follow, while all of our building pieces are sorted in conveniently labeled baggies. If you would like one of these kits for yourself, visit the Kika Goods website and use my code POTATOBLUE10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. I am not sponsored or affiliated by Kika Goods, I simply enjoy indulging in little treats. Before moving on to our first spooky tale, here's a disclaimer. All of these stories have been submitted anonymously, names and places have been changed for the sake of privacy. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, this is our first story. I was 18 at the time, camping with my family in a small secluded spot by the woods. It was a warm summer night, and after spending the day hiking, everyone was settling in by the fire. My parents were talking quietly, my younger siblings already tucked away in the tent. I stayed up a little longer, enjoying the quiet and the way the stars looked out there, far from the city. I don't know when I noticed him, but at some point, there he was. Just standing at the edge of the clearing. A man, maybe in his late 40s, ragged clothes, messy hair, and a dirty, weathered face. His eyes were fixed on me, and he wasn't moving. He didn't look like a hiker or another camper. He looked out of place, like he just wandered out of the woods. I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to freak out my parents or cause a scene. I figured he was probably homeless, maybe just lost or curious about our campfire. But the longer I sat there, the more unnerving it got. He didn't approach, didn't call out, just kept staring at me from the shadows. I tried not to look at him directly, but every time I glanced in his direction, he hadn't moved an inch. Just standing there, watching. My heart started pounding, and I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe he would move on. I thought about telling my dad, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I was 18, after all, practically an adult. Eventually, I crawled into the tent, zipped it up tight, and lay there, listening. I could still feel his presence, like he was right outside staring through the thin fabric. I didn't sleep much that night, my ears straining for the slightest sound. The next morning, he was gone. My parents never knew anything was wrong, and I never mentioned it to them. But I kind of was stupid for how I handled it. When my siblings and I were much younger, we lived in a beautiful but old, strangely built house. I assume the architects never saw a house from the inside before building this one. But it came with a nice garden, a basement, large spiders, a dusty attic, and a friendly older neighbor who loved making music and his tiny pond he dug out himself. All the frogs that visited had names. The attic was usually closed off, insulation foam everywhere for the little children's hands to hold and touch, and old magazines to pull out of the walls. But now and then, when shoving crates filled with old pictures and clothing into the dark, forgotten corners, my parents forgot about the door, and it's locked too. My siblings and I loved it. The lights were barely working, the wood felt ancient. There were perfect, dimly lit spots to read in complete silence everywhere, and damage our poor little eyes in the process too. But what fascinated us most was the small gap between the pitched roof and our walls. And as far as our imagination told us, this had to be a secret tunnel to riches and treasures, or even older magazines that we could pull out of the walls. I was much too tall to squeeze myself into the small space between, but my younger brother fit perfectly. Equipped with a flashlight and the motivation of an adventurer, he crawled into the dust of ages past until we could barely see his feet anymore. He spoke of cobwebs in his face and some old nails here and there, and his motivation for fortune was greater than ever. But then he stopped. We asked what he saw. So many riches, probably. He didn't move, nor did he answer. My sister, almost too tall for the gap, placed herself behind him, still asking if everything was fine, but the only reaction we got from him was almost kicking my sister's nose as he dragged himself backwards. It took some seconds before she herself got out of the gap. He felt desperate. My brother was never big on emotions, besides rage at the occasional lost card game. But I'll remember his round, tear-stained face still dirty as he slowly backed out of the hole again. He didn't find any riches, or gold, or a medieval newspaper. He wouldn't answer our pleas to explain. He did not answer us for days. Until, when we wanted to sneak off into the forbidden space again, he hesitated and whispered, "Don't go. That's where the bones are." The shake in his voice shook us too. We didn't go into the attic ever again, ever. The door remained closed. Months later, when our parents went on a one-day trip, our music-loving neighbor took us for the day. Greatest pasta I'd ever eaten. His walls were decorated with vinyl records, and to my brother's newly discovered distaste, skulls. As we found out, our neighbor did not only love music, but also bones and all things dying. When he took us upstairs, and a little further then, he swung open a door that looked a little too similar to how our attic door looked. And we were greeted with insulation foam, empty skulls, and bones of roadkill not fully cleaned. The worst thing, arguably, was not the smell. It was the small gap in the corner of his equally dimly lit attic, between the pitched roof and his walls, leading not to treasure nor to any riches, but right back to our side of the house. There was a terror that sparked an image, my brother, dusty hands and dusty clothes, a flashlight lighting the room face to face with the face of death, and it smelled too. No escape forwards and no escape backwards. We never told our parents that the attics connected. We never told them about the bones or the smell or the tears my brother shed. We were ashamed, but most of all, afraid. I have a pretty spooky personal experience. I was accompanied by a friend, we'll call him William, on a nightly outing. We were the type of people who enjoyed stargazing, so we left for a nearby desert late in the afternoon. Leaving the city is always a fun experience. The car ride takes a few hours, but seeing the cities getting smaller and the sky lighten up with stars really is worth it. Sadly, I can't remember if we were there for a specific astronomical event or not, but what I do remember is the unexpected cloudy night we ran into when we got there. To give a lay of the land, the desert we go to isn't pure sand and dunes. It's more flatlands with dry bush, cactus, and little desert trees. This area was also a populated part of the desert, as it has hiking trails and buildings for restrooms. It was dark, and we had committed to going into the desert as it was a long drive already and the clouds didn't completely cover the sky, so we'd at least get glimpses of the stars above. We had parked in a designated parking lot near the entrance of the park. There was a small building, a restroom, near our car, and since we knew we weren't going to be there long, we decided not to go deeper into the desert and just stay for about 30 minutes. Stepping out of the car, we stood in the parking lot looking out at patches of open sky. You don't realize how quiet the world can be until you enter nature. It's calming and always welcoming, but on nights like those, it quickly became terrifying. As we stood there, we spoke of random things, none of which are important to the story. During this, my friend would pick up rocks and throw them into the desert, near all the bush near the restrooms. While chatting about nothing, Will hits me with, "Did you hear that?" And I, in fact, did not hear what he heard. "No, what did you hear?" I asked him hesitantly, unsure of where he could be going with this. "There's something out there," he responded with a cautious whisper. I'm skeptical of most supernatural experiences, as I never really saw anything for myself, so I quickly tried to explain this event. I reasoned, "You sure it wasn't a rabbit or a rat? Those animals we've seen in this park plenty of times before, so it only made sense." "I don't know. It sounded weird." Will then reached down for another rock, one bigger than the ones he tossed before. He tossed it near the sound he heard, and I listened with him, trying to figure out what was going on. We heard the rock bounce once, twice, pause, followed by an extra bounce. This was odd. That pause was weird. I recommend you try this. Toss some rocks around and you'll quickly find that there is a pattern. You'll never hear a rock stop and then start again. Hearing that, we stared at each other. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe it got caught in some foliage, then fell. Maybe we just misheard it. Still, it was odd. Will wanted to throw one more rock just to be sure. So he did. He threw it closer to the restroom. We heard it bounce and stop. Waiting, we heard something worse. A rock being thrown back at us. It bounced a bit and landed at our feet. Will and I never saw anyone out there, let alone someone tossing a rock at us from the desert. Our hearts sank, and a chill ran down my body. We very quickly felt unwanted, like we were in someone else's house, unwelcomed and intruding. We had to leave. "Let's get out of here," I asked Will, and he immediately unlocked the car and we left. I still go out to that desert to stargaze, but nothing like that has happened since. I'm not sure what it was that was out there, but I do know that animals don't toss back rocks. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted their story to be read on my Halloween special. Here's how the magical study turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed me building this. It was a lot of fun and it was really easy to build. Now we move on to me drawing this magical study in my own style, while I tell you guys a spooky story of my own. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. I appreciate you and I hope you're enjoying the spooky vibes. If you like this, consider subscribing and leaving a like on the video. And tell me some of your spooky stories in the comments. I would love to read them. Now, on to my frightening true tale. My family and I agree that our house is a bit haunted, and an experience from earlier this year really sold it for us. We had a family member staying over at my house for the night. For the sake of the story, we'll call him Xander. There's only 4 of us in the house, and 3 of us are awake at this point. Xander was supposed to leave around midnight, but we were waiting up for someone else to come over, and we were all having a really good conversation. Deep into our conversation, we hear something coming from outside at the front of the house. The 3 of us get up to check it out, thinking it was the person we were waiting for, but it turned out to be nothing. As we were heading back to our seats, I decided to walk towards the kitchen and get some snacks and water. I had barely stepped foot into the hallway that led into the kitchen when I turned back to ask if anybody else wanted anything. Xander was in the middle of saying something when he completely froze in place. My heart sank. It was like the whole world had stopped. I remember seeing his face, and he wasn't looking at me. He was looking behind me. His eyes started to tear up, and his face was a mix of emotions. Shock, sadness, fear. I didn't move. Eventually, Xander blinks and he takes a huge breath of air. It was like he'd stopped breathing as well. That's when he told us what he saw. Beyond me, in the shadows, he saw a woman's face. Or at least, he thought it was a woman. She had no eyes, just empty sockets covered by skin. The woman's skin was unlike any color Xander had ever seen before, and the only way he could describe it was translucent and off. The worst part, Xander said, was that although she had no eyes, he knows that she was looking right at him, because the moment they made eye contact with each other, her face started to contort and move. "You saw me," he could almost hear her say in his head. Xander doesn't come by my house anymore, and although we haven't seen the woman that he's talked about, we have had our own strange experiences in this house. But I should leave those stories for next year. Happy Halloween! And that's a wrap on the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a lot of fun to create. And I hope you guys are enjoying the spooky Halloween spirit. Do you celebrate Halloween? Do you just enjoy the vibes? Let me know what you thought of this video. And a huge big thank you to all of my members from my Ko-fi, Twitch, and YouTube members. Thank you all so much for participating in this video and supporting content like this. If you'd like to become any one of these members, consider checking out the YouTube channel memberships, consider checking out my Ko-fi, and consider checking me out on Twitch. Any support means the absolute world to me. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Take care.